All right. Well, I guess I'll get started. Thank y'all for being here. This is week 4 of this class. So I have so much material for today that I'm not going to spend time recapping. But I very much encourage you, if you've missed any, to check them out. They're on YouTube. The 3 weeks, I've taught 2 of them, and Freddie Lorick taught 1 of them. But this class is about Richard Beck's book called The Shape of Joy. That's the main resource. You'll see a lot of quotes from that today. But what I've really appreciated about this class is it's taken a lot of different forms of just talking about, what is joy. And we started that very first week. My brief recap. We started the very first week with recognizing how happiness is often in our world searched inside ourselves. We use our self-esteem to try to build that up. And every week we've talked more and more about the shape of joy and what that really looks like to build a sustaining joy that's not fragile. And every week we've been taking a step closer to moving our joy from being inward curved to an outward curved. And so today, hopefully, we'll be able to cover a little bit more of what that means and what it means, what the shape of joy is meant to be in our lives. So, I want to start out with this quote from Brene Brown, which says, "Shame resiliency is rooted in a fundamental conviction, knowing that you are worthy of love and belonging." So I want to ask y'all, what do you hear in that quote? What do you resonate with, or in that quote? That shame resiliency is rooted in a fundamental conviction, knowing that you are worthy of love and belonging.
I just think about children and the fact that it's so important to instill that sense of worthiness and love and belonging in them at a young age, because things start happening early on in life, and if you haven't built that sense of self in them, you have a harder time in life.
Yeah. So you see it start with children. Whenever they don't feel worthy or loved, then that you see that in their adulthood the rest of their life.
They have that shame.
Oh yeah, that shame.
And I think it's sometimes very hard for parents, because in my generation, shame was a form of discipline for girls, right? And so I learned that. And it's hard not to play that out as a mother. And so it's really important, I think, to work on that in yourself.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't play out with your kids.
Yeah, I mean, shame and guilt have a power over us that they are the most effective tools if you want to see immediate change or have somebody internalize something. But over time we begin to see how they're actually can be so destructive to individuals over time. And a part of it, I think, is because it makes them question their worthiness and belonging.
I think the way our brains function is one of the most key things in deciding how we behave and how we function is knowing whether or not we're going to be rejected by our groups, whatever groups that we surround ourselves with. And if you know that you are deserving of being a part of and being loved by people and being welcomed by people, I think it'll just naturally change the way we act and behave.
Yeah.
Just our decision making.
Yeah, it's our sense of belonging is something that drives every decision we make. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think about for kids, even adults, right? Like, I guess love and belonging doesn't mean like 100% like alignment, agreement, acceptance. So it's like the balance of, you can have disagreement, or with kids you can balance the discipline, but still making them feel belong. But just because as adults we may not always agree, but the balance of, you disappoint someone or you let someone down, you question those things, and so the balance of being able to know it's not going to mean perfection or like we don't have conflict, but it's just I like the resiliency because it's a constant push-pull, it feels like.
Yeah, it's not to suggest no one and children don't need correction ever in what they do. That's would be a very problematic world to live in. But it does suggest at the end of the day, are we resilient in what might be a fair question to ask of that is, do we know that we are worthy of love and belonging, even when we need correction, even when there's disagreement? Yeah.
I think it comes down to the difference between who you are and what you do. Like, just because you've done something that is misaligned with God wants, with what God wants for us, or what our parents want for us, or whatever, that might just be, that's just behavior. It doesn't necessarily reflect on your character. We deal with this a lot with our daughter, who tends to internalize everything,
Yeah.
any sort of correction she believes is automatically a commentary on her character, or who she is inside. So to me, that phrase basically is reminding us that just because you do something does not mean that that's who you are.
Yeah. So shame, one of the things that is helpful for me, has been helpful for me to understand shame and the harm of it, is it makes a new I am statement, right? It redefines ourselves in this shame, as opposed to actually just being able to separate what I do and who I am. It fuses those together. So I want to give you a term that is used in the psychology field that talks about this idea of worthiness, love, and belonging. And it's the term mattering. So it's this idea of, do I matter? Am I loved? Am I valued? Do my choices matter? Does my life matter? And whether you're a believer or not, this is something that every single person, and you see it in children specifically, is trying to navigate. Do I matter? And so the idea is, in the psychology field, like, what is their mattering? So there's been studies on mattering and the impacts that it has for a second. So I want you to think about this question for a second, and I don't necessarily want you to answer out loud, but think about this in your own life to kind of put it into perspective. Think about a time, and we'll start with the negative, but like a time when you felt you didn't matter. You felt insignificant. You felt devalued, dehumanized. And just kind of, allow yourself briefly to feel that feeling that comes with that. It is, I can think of it a lot of it is when I was younger, but, there's pain associated with that feeling, and there's kind of trying to talk yourself off of a ledge a little bit of not going into too much shame. But that feeling is a feeling of something deeply painful in us. But think about the opposite of that. Think about a time in your life when you truly felt valued and loved. Like the contrast of those two extremes. When you're in a system, in a place where you feel truly valued and loved and seen and heard, these are two polar opposites that are the idea of mattering. Do we feel that consistently? Is that something, is our mattering high, that we feel we have value and we belong? Or rather, do we have a very low sense of mattering where we don't feel that, where we feel that very infrequently? So, Brene Brown and Richard Beck converge on this idea of how much mattering matters. One of the telltale signs of depression, one of the things you look for as a counselor to understand if someone is struggling with depression is when you hear any form of expression of worthlessness. When a person begins to believe that they are worthless, that their life does not matter, that is a telltale sign you need to check and do a depression inventory. You need to understand where they're at mentally, because this is the idea that is associated too with such high rates of suicidality. right? This feeling that my life doesn't matter, therefore it's not worth living. So we take that to the other extreme of having a life that matters. So the question that naturally comes from, and I guess I did have, mattering, worthy of love and belonging means your life matters no matter what, and an existential fact of your existence, a value that cannot be lost or eclipsed. This, and it sounds redundant, but how much we matter matters, right? It makes a huge difference on our mental health, and it has a huge effect on the mental health of the people around you, how much they truly believe they matter, and how much you truly believe you matter.
Brandon,
Yes.
can we also balance that with the idea that, well, the previous slide about love, with being worthy of love? We fully acknowledge that we do not deserve God's salvation, we do not deserve God's grace, we don't even deserve God's love, but it just dumps it on us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So who in the world are we to look at someone socially and suggest, well, that person isn't worthy of respect or love? Considering what God has done for me, how dare I say such a thing? But we often find ourselves judging other people with how much they deserve love.
Yes.
None of us deserves God's love, but He gives it to us. I think that's his example.
Right, which is a huge piece. If you were here last week or you've seen that class, why we camped out so much in humility as being a basis, and humility truly being this idea that we see ourselves clearly. We see ourselves as, the flawed individual that we are. We see ourselves relative. We see the world in an egalitarian view of the people around us. So it's not we fight against the competition to suggest who matters more, who matters less, who is worthy of love more, and who is not worthy of love. And so, this idea of mattering changes us. It affects us. It affects our mental health significantly. So the question that you might naturally go to next is, where does mattering come from in our lives? And boiled down into two major categories. There's two major categories that determine our mattering, and that's relational or social mattering, and existential and cosmic mattering. So I want to go on the record before I start talking in a second and say that both of these are good. Neither of them are bad. They both, anything that increases your mattering is good. And truthfully, I don't want to make it seem like one is bad. But I want to read this quote from the book. Let me real quick, briefly before this. So, social mattering, I guess I should say more about what these are. So, social mattering is the idea of the people around you. Socially, who makes you feel valued, loved, who reminds you that you belong. That is your social mattering. That you feel you matter to the people around you, and that helps build your mattering. The second one is when you find mattering outside of people. When you find existential mattering, that exists outside of people, a belief that I matter and I have value outside of what the people around me are saying or reflecting to me, outside of the physical support system that I am seeing. I have an existential, a cosmic mattering. So, those are the two ideas.
So the second one then is where religion falls.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. And so, so the second one is this, does become incorporated with our religion or our spirituality. So, I want to read this quote from the book because it tells us a lot. So in 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General sounded the alarm on a rising health risk facing Americans. This new health risk is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, according to the Surgeon General. This threat is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. What could be so bad for you that it is the equivalent of being a pack-a-day smoker?
Loneliness.
It's loneliness. The thing that has more mental health risks and more physical health risks than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and it talks about, it makes a lot of comparisons in the book about how much drinking a day, how much, other various potentially harmful things a day. Loneliness is actually at the top of what they found is harmful for human beings, harmful for our well-being. So, I don't think, I believe, if you were a part of my Be Real class, I believe every emotion was created by God, and I believe that loneliness is something that God created. I don't think it is pure evil. In fact, I think it's a reality of life that there will be, it is a reality of life that in our life we will experience varied degrees of loneliness. But I believe what this study showcases is, the idea of chronic loneliness, of more of an identity taking on kind of a shame of being lonely. So as we think about that, this epidemic brings on the importance of going back to mattering, and specifically in social mattering. Because when we are experiencing chronic loneliness, or even loneliness just over a period of time, it is very easy to lose our sense of mattering. Because we don't have, if it doesn't matter what time I wake up, it doesn't matter what I do in a day, if it doesn't, these things can build up to go, my life is insignificant, my life has less value, I am less worthy of love. And so the problem with relational mattering or social mattering, and I've already dealt with this as a counselor with some of my clients. If you've ever been in counseling, or typically at some point, especially if you're expressing any form of sadness or any form of crisis or anything along the lines of that, your therapist is going to talk to you about who are the people in your life, who is your support system, right? That's a very, very common thing that they're checking in on you to go, who are the people that you can lean on? Who are the people that remind you that you matter? And the reality is, and I thank God truly in my life, and I thank God, even just in this room and in this church and in the people that God has brought into my life, that in this moment I feel good about that. But the truth is, in my life, there may come times that I don't have that. And I've dealt with this with clients too, where it's like, someone who is retired, whose spouse has passed away, they've moved away, they don't necessarily have, a lot of their friends have passed away, they might not be in touch with their family, whatever it is. Or you even think about younger folks that have, all they've known is abuse, neglect, toxic relationships. I use those examples to point out that the idea of truly being grounded in simply relational mattering creates a fragile world for us to walk through, because what if they aren't around anymore? Or what if they treat me poorly? They don't reflect my value well. What if, my mattering centers around my spouse, and my spouse is abusive? What if my mattering centers around person A, B, and C, and they move away or whatever? So there's a little bit of an issue when our belief in our belonging and our value exists in looking at people. And I, to be honest, even as a therapist working with clients, if we get to that point where they feel that way, and in some cases I've had having clients that don't believe in a higher power, it is really complicated to know where we go to build up their mattering in them in that moment, because it is at a state where they do not have people reflecting back that they matter to them. And so it brings us to this principle, it brings us back to the principle of cosmic or existential mattering. This idea that I don't matter because other people are around me and reflect that to me. I matter because I have intrinsic value. Things unseen, something, someone unseen gives me value. And it sounds great to say, yes, we've cracked the code. It's, belief in God. But I have to say this, and I can reflect it honestly as a counselor as well. If my clients were Christian, it doesn't necessarily mean we're in a better place for their mattering either. Because a lot of them are also experiencing a picture of God that makes them question if they matter anymore. If they've fallen out of favor with God, if they question, because of the things that I have done, does God still love me? Is God still with me? That actually might be harder to build up with a client than it would be that they don't believe in anything, right? To have a picture of God that is fractured, that is not unconditional. So I want to share with you, this is Carl Rogers, who is a psychologist, who is, he's famous for coming up with the person-centered approach to therapy or the humanistic approach to therapy. In my grad school program, this is one of the first things that they teach counselors is the works of Carl Rogers, because his focus in therapy was not necessarily any, he did have models that he used, but he brought up how important it is, the most important thing that you can do as a counselor is give your clients unconditional positive regard. And what that meant was, in their lives, it is a guarantee that they have felt the acceptance and value that other people have given them vary. In fact, in any moment, they've had that before, where it's like your parents are giving you advice, they're loving you, but you know what they want you to do versus what they don't want you to do. You know what will make them love you more versus what might make them struggle with you, right? What he found, the code that he cracked that was kind of revolutionary to the counseling, counseling, was clients needed to be in a space of unconditional positive regard in order to experience healing and to experience growth. That they, in that room, don't have to question if they matter or if they have value or if they belong. And you as the therapist are meant to portray that by the interest you take in them, by the empathy that you give them, by the warmth they feel by you. This is the condition that he found was the thing that changed clients, that changed people. That healing only happens in a therapeutic setting where there's unconditional positive regard. And so that example highlights even the psychology field has recognized it matters so much that people know they matter. That changes everything. It changes everything if they can truly experience unconditional love, unconditional positive regard. But the problem with Carl Rogers and the problem with it being a therapist is this is someone you're paying to love you. Right? This is someone you're paying to love you, and you're going to see them for an hour a week maybe, and then you're going to go home. But what he found was healing happens in a space where people have unconditional positive regard, but he could not make it. He can't make you take that with you outside of that therapy room. You have something, Carolyn?
I'm looking at this as God speaking to me. This lesson we're giving here right now, speaking to me, speaking to us. Because in our church family, we can't. I'm looking at what James says in chapter 1 about looking. You hear the word of God, and it's like a mirror. You look at the mirror and keep going. You know, so we are learning about this, and we didn't already know about it. So we have to say, for me, for us, we know people maybe, or we should know people who are needing help in this area. And if we do know those who are needing help in this area, what do you do about it? You just look at that mirror and keep going? Or do we use what we've learned to try to reach out to those people to know that they matter? You know, to be there, to walk along with them however we can.
Right. And so I mean, I love that your brain is going there, and I know that that is something that you do very well, Carolyn, and something that you do with people in the hospital and people all over, and making them feel that they matter and love and belong in their moments. And I love that, and I do believe that there is a message for us in that about how we treat others. But the thing that also you have to take on with that is, I can't fully do this for anyone else. Right? Like, that's the thing about social mattering. It has its limits. That's the thing about Carl Rogers' approach, is it has its limits. And so, right. And so how do we, how do we use what we've just learned about mattering for a situation, for people to have unshakable mattering, for them to have not a fragile but a stable mattering in their life?
Brandon, how much more difficult or less difficult is it to treat someone with not causal depression or reasons for my depression, but congenital depression, born with it? I don't even know how. Is it just a matter of medication to cure a chemical imbalance, or is the counseling pretty much the same?
I mean,
The depressions are not the same. Once a person who has congenital depression has lived half his life and discovered, I'm not thinking the way normal people do, and then has it pointed out to him or her that, okay, you have, this is congenital, you've had it all your life.
mm-hmm.
Is there, I don't know, how do you treat it? That might be too much of a question.
Yeah, I won't go deep into the answer to that, but I will say I'm a proponent of both and trying things because I've seen clients in both camps that medication has changed everything for them, and I have seen clients that medication has made things either worse for them, or talk therapy is, the avenue that helped them the most. And so I would say, I think that's an important question, but one that I'm not going to deep dive right now. But I do think I'm a proponent of both avenues of treatment there, and it's not something that there's a one size fits all solution to, even in the different sources of that. But Bob, that's a good segue that you just talked, because last week, the word that you caught onto, Bob, that is coming back this week is the word transcendence. As we're talking about what is cosmic or existential mattering, it gets us to a point of how do we encounter that? How do we move to that in our lives? And Beck uses the word transcendence. So I want to hear from y'all. What does transcendence mean to you? What is your working definition of transcendence? Maybe it's a word you're not familiar with, comfortable. Reggie?
So if I understand correctly, that transcendence is talking about, being able to move to a place where you are feeling you've got these connections, and
Mhm.
you've got your matter group that is with you. What I think there's two sides to it. I think, some people individually can go after that.
Mhm.
If I'm feeling lonely, okay, let me do something about that. Let me go and meet some people. Let me, create some relationships. Let me show myself friendly. So some people can do that and don't necessarily, fall into a depressive mode. They know what they need. They go make it happen, right? So I think we all have a responsibility to do our part to make ourselves available. The other side of it is, especially in a church environment, I think that, we have things like, life groups and stuff like that. And the purpose of it is to create that connection, that bond. And of course, it works better as people are vulnerable and willing to really lower their,
Mhm.
the veil and let people in, so that we can become friends and create those types of things. But so so you got the individual responsibility, but I think a church, people like Michael, and yourself, working with the youth, you're looking at people and you're seeing, who you need to graft into the fellowship so that they can be better. You know what I mean? And give them that opportunity to connect, and then it's up to them to do their part to take advantage of that as well. So.
Yeah, I think something I kind of heard in that is like the holy moments with people and community and vulnerability that comes out in that is a piece of that transcendence.
I think of it as like, in some sense, beyond. In theology, we talk about God's immanence and his transcendence, which are not words we use every day, so I always have to remind myself which is which.
Right.
But I think God's immanence is like that he's here. God is understandable, relatable. It's like the incarnation. He's with us. He's present. But God's transcendence is that he's beyond.
Yeah.
He's more than that. He's other than this world. You can't fully understand him. And
Right.
that's something that goes beyond what we see, beyond this world. It transcends to something deeper, something other.
Yeah. So the going beyond, seeing the unseen in the world, and especially as it relates to God in the spiritual realm. Someone else had their hand up. All right, here.
When we look at the world's kind of depressing.
Right.
We're born, we live, we die.
Right.
And while we're here, it's not always a great ride for many of us. And we see a lot of suffering. And I do genealogy research, and I have yet to find an ancestor who's still alive. And in fact, at this point, my parents aren't here anymore.
Right.
And it's not looking good for me. So, I had a birthday yesterday. So it's a depressing side, and I think about Richard Dawkins talking about we live in a pitiless, meaningless universe. And then God is there. And there's actually evidence we can look at to say, whoa, there is something beyond this world. There is a transcendent God. And you even have evidence of his nature. It's a good nature, and if we look for him, we'll find him. You ask the question, how do you get there? Or how do you help other people get there? That's a very difficult thing, and part of the answer is you're not going to help anybody. Well, help maybe, but you're not going to get anybody there. God's the one who's ultimately going to get them there. So maybe the other way to say the question is, how do we get them on the path where they're looking for God, where God will open the window for them?
Yeah. So, and the reality is, and it feels relevant over the past month, to live in the world that we live in, to see brokenness around us, objective brokenness, and to see so much pain and hurt. How can we transcend above what is being seen and what is taking place right before our eyes, right? And how do we encounter a God who is invisible in a world of brokenness that's so visible in front of us?
So I was looking up that definition because I like words from time to time. And it clarified what I was thinking as I was looking at the meanings behind it. And I guess whenever I sit up there and think about transcendence just as a whole, it's knowing that even in the midst of all the noise, all the things that's going on, that there is some form of hope that is beyond what I can see or what I can imagine. Like the scripture says that, God can do exceedingly abundantly above everything we can ever imagine or think. And so in the midst of that, it's holding on to that hope, not saying that you're not going to be scared, that you're not going to be fearful, that you're not going to be, uneasy, but knowing that there is something there that can go beyond what I can see. Because what we see, we only see what's on the surface and we feel like it's going to be all right or whatever. But going beyond what we really can see and believe, and I believe that's when God shows up and he shocks us. Because it's like, dang, Lord, you've been holding me down like this, and I've just been like, what? So it's just going beyond what we in our mortal minds can see, and seeing what he is, a God who loves us, who's willing to take care of us, who's willing to just support us and hold us. It's like we say a lot of times at work, the tightest hug. It's the tightest hug that you could ever imagine.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's class. No, but I know I love that so much, and so much of and integrating the mattering piece too. That someone that there is in the midst of a hopeless situation, there is someone an unseen who loves me and gives me hope and has a purpose for me, even when all I see in front of me is devastation, and all I feel is hopelessness in the world that around me. And so I want to share a word that was said a lot is actually one of the Latin origins of the word. In Latin, it means climbing beyond or rising above. In a modern definition, it's the state of going beyond ordinary limits, whether those limits are physical, mental, spiritual, or conceptual. That is what transcendence is, the encountering of a world going above what is seen. What is seen exists here, and transcendence says there's something more than I see. So I want to share this quote from Beck. And it's a long one, but you might be wondering, I've not really even said the word joy that much in this class, but here we go. And so on the journey toward joy, we face here a puzzling challenge. Can we convince ourselves that reality is real, especially those invisible spiritual realities our ancestors took to be manifestly obvious? Simply put, when we turn outward and speak of transcendence, is there anything out there? If you leave the cave, will you really see the sun? Let me be brutally honest. Psychologists who study joy and happiness are coy on this point. They know the research, but almost every book and podcast on the market sharing the science of joy, awe, gratitude, meaning in life, mattering, happiness, and human flourishing hedges on this central question, the question of transcendence. Scientists are happy to let their research lead you to the very edge of the cave because the science is clear on these points. You have to exit the cave. Transcendence is the secret to joy. Faith and spirituality are good for your mental health. Study after study has shown this. Joy has a shape. The secret to happiness is turning outward. There's so much there, and I'm going to come back to it in a second. But I want to pause because some of you might have just been thrown for a whirl when he said happiness at the end. And I want to make it super clear. And you know, I'm not going to belabor this point because any joy conversation in a church, you know, has had this point before. But I want to say it maybe in a different way. But happiness is an emotion. It's on the feelings wheel. Emotions exist as feedback systems for our world. Something happens, it's on our control, we have an emotion. That is the basis of the emotion of happiness. Is something happens, there is some stimulus that then gives me the emotion happy. So therefore it's fragile because there are also things that give me, I might be happy and then there's a stimulus that makes me sad. But you know, I love Beck's use of this word, but joy is a transcendent emotion. He also puts gratitude in that category. It's an emotion that is not based upon the stimulus. It is a state of emotion that exists beyond the spectrum of the emotions, the feelings wheel. Joy is something that dwells within us that is not fragile in the sense of our happiness that goes up and down daily. So with that in mind, going back to this quote, I'll ask you briefly, is there anything from this, lots of words on the screen, but is there anything from this that really stood out to you in hearing what Beck had to say about joy and transcendence?
Is the reason that so few psychologists address transcendence, and we as Christians would say God, is because so many of them don't believe in God? What's he trying to say?
It's because they're focused on what is measurable, and then that's the extent that which I love in this quote. The extent that science can go to is not transcendent, is what is measurable in this moment. They can measure people's brain, they can measure their emotions, they can have them self-report. But experiences that transcend, that involve spirituality, is unmeasurable, right? So they can't report on that. Elisa?
I think as Christians, I think sometimes some of us have a harder time with transcendence because we have people saying what's possible and what's not possible with God, and we get into this box of what God can do and how he can show up, or what he can't do, and when he can't, how much mercy he can have, or what mercy he can't have. And it causes so many of us to not be able to transcend, because then we have to leave the cave and we have to actually put off some of those ideas, and we have to walk out on our own into a mystery, into a place of holiness that is beyond what other people can show us or tell us or explain to us on our own from the exterior. So it's our own personal journey that I've had other Christians say, "Oh, well, he doesn't love you that much."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you really
There
did
is a
something
limit.
really bad. I don't think there's any more help for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, I have to believe something otherwise, or I'll die.
Yeah.
Or I will never feel joy again. I have to feel something else. And that's the part that science, nobody can explain. Nobody but God, the Holy Spirit, can explain that secret, that mystery, and I love the mystery. I want to dwell in the mystery. I enjoy the holiness. I enjoy that for others. I want that for others. And I'm always wanting to encourage people to walk out of the cave, enjoy the sunlight, because it is so beautiful. It is
Right.
so beautiful.
Yeah. No, I love that. Sweet.
I was just thinking about, to kind of piggyback on what Teresa was saying about the mystery. is when I've made a conscious decision to embrace walk by faith and not by sight. When I decided and kind of willed myself to believe what God has said He's given me, you know, that He has given me peace, that He has come to give me life more abundantly. Even though I may not be seeing those things, the faith and the hope that those things are really there has given me that transcendent joy.
Yeah. Yeah. So in being faithful, in responding in the way that we're instructed to, there for you is a space that often leads to this transcendence. All right, Jason.
I would guess this might have something to do with our cultures like individualism, but I feel like there's a kind of shallow pop psychology idea that all you need is inside of you, that the secret to happiness is inside of you. And I think there's a lot of value to understanding yourself and the types of things that like talk therapy does well. But I think part of what he's saying here is that ultimately, like, what you really need to do is go out and serve somebody else. You need to go experience awe at something beyond yourself. You need to be grateful for something outside of yourself. And that idea that all we really need is us, and that the secret to happiness is internal, and, you know, even whatever, you know, like, there's all sorts of phrases like that. That's too self-centered, you know,
Right.
That's never gonna get you all the way there.
Right. It has its limits, and it's fragile if it's found inside of us, because inevitably we find the flaws, or someone else finds the flaws and reflects back, you know, this broken sense of ourselves in the world. Catherine.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of speaking with a group of moms who lost daughters at Camp Mystic. And, you know, a question that they, I feel like, asked me repeatedly was, well, when do you know, and if you, I've mentioned it in class before, we lost our middle daughter when she was 18 months old. And so that's why I knew this, one of the moms, and that's why I was asked to speak with them. And they asked me repeatedly, like, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know when this is going to happen? Or when do you get over, you know, this part or that part? And I told them, you know, for us, I feel like going through something like that, and we had, our oldest daughter was 3.5 at the time, I feel like what it did in a big way, especially watching Nora, our oldest, go through it, was it kind of closed the gap for me between heaven and earth. And you know, it's easy to ask questions often. I mean, in this case, it's hard for these moms to understand why, you know, why God would allow their daughters to only be on earth for 9 years or 8 years or however. And for us too, obviously, 1.5 years. It seems kind of like, surely this is not what it was meant to be, you know, what could possibly be the reason? And I told them, I feel like, you know, the thing that I kept coming back to was just this idea that, you know, we are all sojourners here. Like, we are, I like to think, I may have said this before, but I like to think of it like, you know, we are sent to earth on kind of like a mission trip, and then we go home, you know, like, God sends us, this is our mission trip, you know, we do whatever our higher purpose is, and then we go home. And so for some people, it's a 100-year mission trip, some people it's 18 months, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, we made a decision very early on, like literally right away, that we had to decide that there had to be a higher purpose. It doesn't help to ask all of the why would this happen, because that's not going to change anything. What matters is what you decide the purpose to be going forward through what you are capable of doing. And so, you know, we talk about, you know, this motto that we have in our family is be intentional and choose joy. And they ask, how can you do that? Well, you have to decide that for whatever reason you are here, but there is like I think even non-believers can agree, like all of us are only here for such a short amount of time, a blip in time in the great scheme of things. And so everything we do, one way or another, is gonna have an impact. It's kind of like that theory of time travel. You know, everybody's like scared about time travel because they think if they did one thing differently, it would like completely alter the universe, but they don't think that the little things they do today matter.
Yeah.
You know, kind of the same thing, right? Like, we are here as sojourners for a short period of time. What we do is going to have an impact. And so it's when you think about it like from a, outside perspective, like if you're outside looking down at it, I feel like that is what can help us kind of figure out our place and figure out like the long-term purpose of the things that happen in our lives. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, that was
It
really
does.
powerful. Yeah. No, I mean, in moments, and something that, Beck even starts the book talking about, joy is not defined in the happiest moments, but in the lowest moments of your life. Are you experiencing, can you see the transcendent? Can you transcend upon what's in front of you? Because what's in front of you is, in examples like that, the most devastating thing that this world can have, the biggest punch this world can give you. What does it look like for transcendence to take place in that moment? And so I got to cover a lot of things really quick, which will be fine. But, so one of the most transcendent moments of my life, and a special moment that I got permission to share, is the source of this picture, which is me in Maddox Lane at camp a few years ago. And I don't tell this story to brag about myself. It's not about me, it's about him. But we were singing, we were worshiping on the final night of camp, and just all of a sudden, Maddox leans over, and entire body is trembling, and he just starts weeping in the middle of this song. And I'm not sitting with him, I'm sitting a few rows back, and people wave me over, and they say, you got to come here. And because he's not talking, he's just trembling, he's crying. This is like this huge moment. And so I get over there, and everyone, that was the end of worship, so literally everyone left. And I just put my hand on his back, and he can't speak, can't move. So I'm just sitting there, and I don't even know. Something in that moment, I just start weeping too, where no words are being exchanged. I'm just hand on his back. I'm crying, he's crying, his whole body's trembling. And all of a sudden, he just starts saying to me, he's here. He's here. And I'm like, who? And he was like, Jesus, he's right here with me. And I'm like, I can't even be skeptical, because his entire body is trembling. I'm watching this boy weep in front of all of his friends and everything. This is a moment. And I'm like, how is it? And he was like, it is amazing. Like, he's weeping and he's saying all this stuff. And then he's like, Brandon, I want to be baptized. And I'm like, I have never been more sure of somebody getting baptized than you in this moment. I'm so happy. And that, I think it was right at that moment, he just came up and he grabbed me like that, and Brittany snapped a picture. But it was, and I mean, there's a whole lot more to that story, but it was a moment that, and I mean, after we're processing, he's like, I want to be a missionary, I want to do all this stuff, I want to experience that the rest of my life, and it was just like a moment of true transcendence that, like, I, even just being adjacent to it, I'm like, this changed me, like, in this moment. Like, it was a beautiful moment. And if you're like me, you might be thinking, you're comparing stories in your life, and if you've ever had a moment, which I'm sure there are moments in this room like that. But I think what that showcases to me, and as we're talking about this idea of transcendence, and tying that together with mattering, is a moment, and what I've heard from folks of their transcendent moment is a moment of being fully seen and fully loved changes them. It changes them because they transcended above what was seen and felt fully loved. Their mattering could not have been higher. It was existential mattering that will carry them the rest of the way. And I say this, I share this passage from 1 John 4. Let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who has loved been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin. And last week, if you were in class, we talked about the experience of awe. And science reports awe is not only good for the body, good for the soul. It is the number one evoker of awe is moral beauty. Is encountering moral beauty causes more awe in us than anything else. Scientifically, that is what causes more awe in us than anything else. And I believe that this is the existential mattering of encountering the cross, of encountering the crucified Christ, is that true moment of meeting that I am truly loved. The most the most beautiful moral thing that's ever been done is what is on that cross. And can we approach that and that be the basis of our joy? Can we transcend into that? And so I hope that this class has been helpful, and it ends in kind of a more basic ending, but what I hope this class has been is a roadmap to get you to that point, because scientifically it's proven in the ways that it can be that it changes everything. And I would say in my life, it does change everything to have the right picture of a God who so dearly loves you and that offers value and mattering to you every single day, not because you've earned it, but because that's who you are. And so some of this class, I'll end with a quote from the book, and then I'll pray, and then we'll be done. But, some of this class, some of you might be a little bit like, that was kind of woo-woo or whatever. But I love the way that he ends this book, because he ends it in a way that addresses that. And it just gives you something really practical to take from this class. He says, "But if here at the end you still harbor doubts, let me encourage you to consider that ancient advice from 1 John. If you're struggling with the sacred, if transcendence feels vague or imaginary, here's a good first step. Love something. Love another person, love your garden, love your pets, love the earth, love something true. Love something beautiful, love something good. For in love, you'll encounter a reality bigger than yourself. Your ego will grow smaller. You'll be pulled into a relationship with the world. Love will talk you out into the sunlight. Some people who have been tempted by suicide have been able to stave off that dark temptation because no one would be left to water and care for their plants. The thinnest tether of love sticking around to care for your plants was enough to keep them connected to life." So, that's better than anything I'll say, but I want to pray and then we'll be done. God, we thank you so much for God, your Son. And God, we thank you for the fact that you love us. God, I pray for every person in this room, every person in this church, God, every person in the world. Can we encounter you? God, can we transcend our eyes to a reality that holds us up, God, that shows us we matter and are loved even when we feel like we don't, or we're told we don't. God, could we find that and hold that? And God, could that be something that continues to give us joy in this world? God, can that make a joy that's unshakable no matter what the circumstances are? God, could you help us to experience, God, we just read you are love, but God, could we experience exactly what this quote says? God, could you just show us the wonders, the mystery of love? And God, may we love something, someone, and God, ultimately, may we love you. So God, we thank you for this class. We thank you most of all for your Son. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Brandon.